Over-opinionated.
Hello everyone, welcome to episode 21 of Over-opinionated. I am Josh Scott and I am your host. I hope everyone had a great week. I hope the Lord has blessed you. My wife suggested that I do this episode on how the U.S. government works, because there's a lot of people that are concerned about politics but don't know exactly how the government works. Maybe they don't remember their government course or in 12th grade, like most people are supposed to take. I had to take it in 12th grade. And maybe it's been a few years, maybe you didn't pay attention, still passed. But this is basically going to be government class and a condensed time for the U.S. government, how it's supposed to work. Now, I can't cover everything in this episode and how everything operates, but I want you to walk away with a general picture about how the U.S. government works if you don't. And at the end, after I end, I want to give you some advice of how Christians should work with the government and in the government. So we're going to start off by talking about the United States Constitution, which is really a great document. It was wrote in 1787 and ratified in 1788 and has been working since 1789. Many people say that was the birth of the United States. I don't agree with that. I think it was the birth of the new government of the United States. Before that, we used something called the Articles of Confederation, but the articles were a little bit too weak to operate a federal government, so the states sent delegates to reform the Articles of Confederation. Instead, the delegates elected to write a new constitution, and that new constitution was wrote down by the great Virginian and later president James Madison. And then later, after the Constitution was wrote, we had the Bill of Rights be wrote and ratified. The Constitution was designed to set up a system of checks and balances and a separation of powers. If you look at the American Revolution, the crime of the American Revolution was the crown was too powerful, and the British government was too powerful on the colonies. So they devised a system to make sure that no branch of government could be too powerful. We have three branches of government. The first is the legislative branch, which is considered the most crucial, at least by the founding fathers' perspective. And it wasn't supposed to be the most powerful, because each branch was supposed to have a separation of powers about equal to each other, but most consequential because they were writing down the laws. Now we have a bicameral legislature, meaning that we have two parts of each of the legislature, one being the Senate and the House of Representatives. The House and the Senate both have different powers, but also they both make legislation. They both make laws. It was a compromise. They called it the Great Compromise or the Connecticut Compromise that gave us our bicameral two house legislature. The bigger states, or the states with the most population, wanted a legislature that was composed of a representatives that made up the majority of the population. So the more population you had, the more control you had in the legislature. If your state had 1 million people in it, for what, to pick an example, there wasn't as many people in back in the colonies, this new states that were colonies. If you had 1 million people in it, Virginia said we should have more legislators than a small state should have, like Vermont or Delaware. The smaller states said we should all have equal representation because if it wasn't for that, states like Virginia would just rule the roost and push everything they want down on us. So the compromise would be we would have a house that would be comprised of the everyday population. Whatever state had more population would have more representatives. But the compromise came into effect that no matter how many people you have in a state, that you would get 2 representatives in the Senate, having 2 senators. And I apologize if you're picking up on my kitten meowing. We adopted a cat here recently in the Scott household. But I'm going to continue, and hopefully little cat noises don't bother you too much. But so that was the Great Compromise. So today we have California, our biggest state in the country, with several million people in it, and has a population that many countries do, and sometimes bigger than many countries. They have the same exact senators as Wyoming, the least populated state in the country. And a lot of people will say that's not fair, that's not right, we should have more, we have a lot more people. And a lot of people on the left, maybe it's the extreme left, say that we should abolish the Senate because it's not representative, it's not very democratic. Well, the Senate was not designed to be democratic. It was actually designed to represent the states, okay, not the everyday people. The House of Representatives is for the everyday people. They're the common man's representative, okay? They're elected every 2 years, and the fathers did that on purpose so that they had a short turnaround, okay? So they have to answer to their constituents more, and that they have to be more aware of what their constituents are wanting and what they are feeling at the time. But they gave the senators 6-year terms, okay? They gave the senators longer terms so people's tension and fire and fury would calm down over time. So they would give senators more leeway to decide on bills and vote. And because sometimes the founding fathers thought that voting in a particular way could be better for the nation and better for the people, but the people might not like it. So we have a representative government where I and where you can go and vote for our representatives. And now we can vote for our senators as well. And in that, we are trusting them to represent us. That doesn't mean we always get what we want from our representatives. Now, we get to hold them accountable by elections. If something our congressman or senate does that really bothers us, we can elect a new representative, okay? With that being said, the founding fathers did not want a direct democracy where we're going and voting for every issue, okay? It's impractical. I have a job, and I can't go and sit down and sit in a committee and vote on every issue. You can't either, and the founding fathers didn't want that. They wanted some wise men, especially in the Senate, wise men to be able to make choices for us, but through our consent. Now, the original Senate actually was elected by the state legislatures. So the state of Virginia, the House of Delegates, and the state Senate would come together and elect our state senator. Okay, so they were even more distant from the people. But the idea behind that was because because as a legislature, you can know what the better type of representative or senator would be, right? So, as a legislature, you would be more established in knowing who should be in power more, okay? Who should have better consent in the government and consenting the government. And it gave the states more of a role in the federal government. So, if the state of Virginia didn't like something or wanted something else done in the federal government, they can elect a senator through. Now they would all have to vote on it and then elect them. Then they could vote for a senator that could bring up that issue. And I actually, this a lot of people will not like this. I actually think that is the better way. Now I consider myself a populist in most things, but the populist movement kind of said, "Hey, let's elect our own senators." I think it had a good reason. Why don't we send all our representatives and senators from the people? But when you get away from the tradition that says the states are going to say what the federal government can and cannot do, and it gave the states more of accountability within the federal government. They had more of a say-so. So if they knew that the budget was going too high, okay, or the national debt was going too high, and that was going to affect them, or this and that, or how to allocate resources, they could put their legislatures in charge and say, this is your job. And if that legislator did not do a good job for the state, the next time it came around, they might not have their job, opposed to the people directly electing them. I know a lot of people will disagree with me on that. But then you had the House that was directly elected by the people inside their district. So they're more accountable. They have 2-year elections instead of 6-year elections. They're seen as the everyday common representative. And there are 435 members of the House of Representatives divided equally amongst the states. So if you live in a population that every district is supposed to be as equal as possible, and they try their best to do it. Every once in a while you're going to have a little bit more people here or more people there, and you can't help that. But they come down to a pretty precise number. So my representative, Congress Morgan Griffin of the Virginia 9th Congressional District, he has about roughly the same amount of people in his district, even though it's a very large district land-wise, because our people are more scattered in the rural country areas of Southwest Virginia. But his district has about the same amount of people in it as AOC's district in New York City. Even though her district is very small compared to ours land-wise, we have the same amount of people, meaning we have the same amount of representatives. And our representative and our vote in Washington through him is worth just as much as AOC's in New York City. And that's why some people don't like the Senate, because it gives smaller states the same exact representation in the Senate. So West Virginia has as many people in it as New York does, even though West Virginia has a lot less people in it. But that gives West Virginia more of a say in the federal government. I think it's very smart how the founders did it. They organized it where the people have rule in the House of Representatives, okay? So you have the people, and we divide the House equally among the people, and they get that rule. But we also have a Senate that is supposed to represent the whole state. So as an individual entity, as a state, West Virginia has as much say as California. Wyoming has as much say as Texas. And I think that's a very good thing, because if you don't have that, then the federal government can rule over these small states with an iron fist. And that's what the founding fathers didn't want. And there's a few differences. The House of Representatives elects a speaker, and that speaker can be anybody. I could be elected speaker. They don't have to be a member of the House, but they have always been a member of the House. Okay, so the ruling party will vote in the speaker. Everyone gets a vote, but obviously the party with the majority wins, and you have a speaker that is mostly the majority lead, what would have been the majority leader in the House of Representatives, and sometimes they appoint another majority leader, but it's who is ever the head of the Republican Party. Right now, we have a Republican House, so it's Kevin McCarthy. Now he went through a fiasco to get it, much more than other speakers do, but he got it. So if and when the Democrats had it, they always elected their leader, Nancy Pelosi. So it's the leader of the party that is in the majority that gets the speakership. Now, they control the strings of the purse. All legislation regarding the United States finances come from the House of Representatives. Now, the Senate still has to sign off on it. They still have to vote for it, right? But it has to start in the House of Representatives. Um, they have the power to impeach federal officials, and impeach doesn't mean thrown out of office, but voted upon. You are voted upon by the House that you are no longer fit. Like President Trump was voted upon the House that he was no longer fit to be president. Then it was passed to the Senate to see if they would throw him out of the presidency, and they elected twice to not throw him out of the presidency. Most bills are introduced by the House of Representatives. Okay, the Senate can introduce a bill too, but 90% of them, that's a Josh Scott guesstimation, so don't quote me on it, start in the House of Representatives. So it's a very powerful body, even though they serve shorter term limits, and they're elected every 2 years. And every 2 years, every House member in the United States is up for re-election. Now, some of those seats are very safe seats in very red areas, and some are very blue seats in very blue areas. And you have the in between that the parties fight tooth and nail for in the purple districts to control the House of Representatives. Some other qualifications to be a representative: you must be at least 25 years old, a United States citizen for at least 7 years, and a resident of the state you're running from, but not, you don't have to be a resident of the district. So, Congressman Morgan Griffin, he lives in the state of Virginia, but he doesn't live in the 9th Congressional District. Now, he used to. They drew him out of the district just a little bit, okay? So, he still ran in our district and won overwhelmingly. Um, Now let's switch to the Senate. The Senate is composed of 100 members, 2 senators for each state. Um, and that happened after the 17th Amendment in 1913. Before that, senators were chosen by state legislatures. Um, they are elected by 6 year terms by the people of each state. Senators' terms stagnate so that about 1/3 of the Senate is up for re-election every 2 years. So not every senator. That's another protection that the founding fathers put in place. They didn't want all these senators to be up for re-election. They didn't want every single senator. And the Senate's supposed to be a slow-moving body that can not that can stop bad legislation, but a slow-moving body that would look through this legislation that's coming up and say, this is good, this is not. The system is actually built for gridlock, okay? The system's built for gridlock, and we can get more into that. The Vice President of the United States may cast a vote if it's an undecisive vote and it's a tie. He's actually the president of the Senate. But other than that, unless there is a tie-breaking vote that needs to be cast, or unless there's a ceremony like the State of the Union, they have the Senate Majority Leader, who is currently Democratic Senator Chuck McConnell from New York. Since the Democrats have the majority in the Senate, they have the majority leader. The minority leader and former majority leader is Mitch McConnell, the Republican from Kentucky. So in order to pass legislation, both sides must pass legislation, which is passed on to the president, where the president has three options. He can veto it, which sends the bill back to the House of Representatives and the Senate, or he can sign it into law, or he can not sign it and not veto it, and then I think within 10 days it becomes law. So the president, if there's a bill that he doesn't want to sign into law, and if there's a bill that he doesn't want to veto, he can still let it pass and become law. If the president sees a law is unfit and he vetoes it, it sent back to the House and the Senate, and the House and the Senate can actually overturn a presidential veto with 2/3 votes in both the House and the Senate. So if, let's say, for example, a Republican had a supermajority in both the House and both the Senate, and there was a Democrat in office of the presidency, the Democrat could veto the bill, and then the Republicans in the legislature could pass it again, but they'd have to have a 2/3 majority, and that 2/3 majority would pass the bill. That doesn't happen much nowadays with our divided government. A lot of times we see a very close to 50-50 Senate and a close to 50-50 House of Representatives. So we don't really have that happening too much in today, but it is possible. A few more powers the legislative branch holds is going over to the Senate side. The Senate has the power to confirm Supreme Court justices, and also has the power to confirm the appointments of the president's cabinet. The legislative branch is the only branch of government that can declare war on a foreign entity. Now, the president can request that we declare war. This is exactly what happened in 1941 when President FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, asked Congress to declare war on Japan after bombing Pearl Harbor. And Congress obviously did declare war on Japan. The executive branch, which is the branch that the president is under, has the powers of carrying out the laws, executive in the laws. He is also the leader of the country. He is the commander-in-chief. He controls the United States military. He can't declare war, but he does control the United States military. If something arises, he can instruct the military to defend us or to invade another country if we have to. And under him would be the vice president and his cabinet. And his cabinet is confirmed by the Senate. He also has a huge role in influencing the country with his political beliefs and his statements. He is normally looked up to as a moral man of figure, at least in the past, okay? At least in the past, people looked up to the president for inspiration and sometimes for morality. Now, never go to a government official for your morality, okay? but some people in the past have put him up on that pedestal. It is the officiating, um, highest official in the land, the United States of America. And I want to throw that out there. I can talk more about this in the Christian aspect of it. No matter who is president at all, Republican, Democrat, Independent, man, woman, doesn't matter, white or black, you should respect the integrity of the office. That's what Christians should do. That's what Americans can do. You can campaign against the president. You can criticize the president. Okay, but you should respect the office and dignity of the president. I believe God tells us to do this. We should hold the president in the same regard as a king. And now Thomas Jefferson's rolling over in his grave. But what I mean by that is, you should show the president the same amount of respect that you would show King Charles or Queen Elizabeth if you're British, okay? You should have that much respect. That doesn't mean you can't disagree with them. That doesn't mean you can't have if Joe Biden walked up to shake my hand and wanted a conversation, I would tell him the areas which I believe he was wrong, okay? But I would try to do it in a respectful manner. Now that doesn't mean you have to take a picture with him. If the president asks to take a picture with you, or if you would like to say, no, Mr. President, I don't agree with your policies. I wish you for the best of luck, and I personally pray for you. But I personally don't want to take a picture with you and pose for a picture when I am in the Republican Party. And you can do vice versa if you're a Democrat. And I don't want this to look bad on me if I want to do anything in the future. I'm okay with that. I think that's fine if you do it in a respectful way. Now, if you say, no, F you, and slap him, obviously that's wrong. Don't do that. But it's okay to deny the president that. And the president has a huge aspect in foreign policy and sending his diplomats to places, speaking with foreign leaders. Like I said, he influences the nation so much. He's the commander-in-chief. He's what people think about all the time, being the cheese. That's what people care about the most is the presidency. And I care a lot about the presidency. I also care a lot about the legislature because I know a legislature can tie the hands of a president. Okay, a lot of times you have the term a lame duck president. That's when the president's about to leave office and both houses of Congress are in the opposite party. Well, we're going to move on to the judicial branch. The judicial branch's job is to evaluate the laws to see if they are constitutional or not. It's actually not the legislature's branch's job to vote on laws. I know a lot of people get confused on this, and I think sometimes that's because of an abuse that has happened with the court in the past. The legislative branch does not make laws. They determine if the laws that have been passed by Congress or by a state is constitutional and matches up with the Constitution. Okay, a lot of times we'll say, well, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she voted no. Okay, it's easy to say vote, and I don't think you're being super unconstitutional when you say vote because I know what you mean. But she didn't vote; she ruled, she decided. Okay, it is the Supreme Court's job to put in place Congress that they don't pass a law that is unconstitutional, or it's also in place to put a check and balance on the president's office with executive orders. Here recently, Joe Biden, it's been a little bit ago, but Joe Biden signed an executive order to get rid of $10,000 worth of student loans for everyone who makes under a certain amount of money. Well, the judicial branch declared that unconstitutional. He couldn't do it through an executive order. So that stopped that. And the executive branch can also stop legislation that was unconstitutional. If a bill was passed that said you can't be on the street corner with a pro-life sign, if you, let's say you're following all the laws and you're following all the ordinances, it's saying you can't be on a street corner that says "Don't kill babies." Okay, the Supreme Court would have the right to say that's unconstitutional. The First Amendment protects the right for you to say that. Now, if you get fired from your job, you can get fired from your job. Okay, the First Amendment doesn't protect you from your job. I know a lot of times we might wish it did, but that job has the freedom to associate with you or not associate with you. I would just not work. I would try not to work for a company that was be so narrow-minded that would say if you're pro-life or conservative, you can't work here. Now, there's a difference. I'm going on a side tangent. I'm very opinionated, and I think that those opinions have hurt me in the job market before in interview processes, and I've picked up on that because people have known me. But I tell these people, and I haven't had that problem since I moved, but I've told these people before that have been interested in hiring me that when I go to work, I go to work. I don't go to spread my political agenda, okay? Now, I'm not going to lie to you. Do I try to spread the gospel of Jesus at work? Kinda, yeah. But I do it smart, and I don't just try to force a Bible down you. I might say, hey, do you go to church anywhere if I'm on lunch break or something? Now, if someone asks me my opinion at work about politics, I will give it to them in a respectful manner. But I don't believe work is a campaign field. I do believe work's a mission field. There's a little bit difference. But I'm going to do it smart, and I'm going to do it within company policies. But yeah, when I go to work, I go to work. I don't go to win a political campaign. Now, the Supreme Court is put in check by both the executive branch and the Senate and the legislative branch, okay, through the Senate. So whenever a Supreme Court justice passes away, or if they step down from office, the way they are replaced is the president finds a judge that he likes, and he appoints them, and then the Senate confirms them. So the Senate's role in the Constitution is called advise and consent. Now, if the president puts out a judge that the Senate does not like, the Senate can vote the judge down and say, sorry, Mr. President, try again. Okay, so it's advise and consent role. So the president's put in check by the Senate, and the Senate's put in check by the president because the president's only has the power to appoint the Supreme Court, and then the Senate has to confirm it. And now, a lot of times, if it's a judge that was appointed by a conservative president or Republican president and Senate, then when they're getting a little bit older, when they think that they might have to kick that bucket soon, they'll step down with a Republican president and a Republican Senate. And then if you have a Democrat appointed judge and a Democrat Senate and a Democrat president, a lot of times they'll step down. Which, lastly, did not happen with Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She was appointed by a Democrat president and Democrat Senate, super liberal justice, and had the opportunity. She had the opportunity to step down, but she didn't. She held on to that power, and then she died. But she died when a Republican was president, and the Republicans controlled the Senate, sealing the doom for the liberals on the Supreme Court, giving the conservatives a 6-3 majority. But oftentimes, Chief Justice Roberts will vote with the liberals, making it a 5-4 decision. So it can get tighter than what it is normally, but the conservatives have a pretty good grasp on the Supreme Court now because they played their cards right with Mitch McConnell. When conservative Justice Anthony Scalia passed away, Obama was the president and appointed Merrick Garland for the Supreme Court, but Mitch McConnell and the Republicans did not take a vote on it, saying they were going to wait until the presidential election. That opened up the next president, which was Trump, to vote on the Supreme Court justice and give the Republicans another conservative on the Supreme Court. Then Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away, giving them another justice. And then Justice Kennedy retired, and President Trump appointed another justice there. But the Kennedy appointment was a conservative judge stepping down with another conservative judge taking his place. Now, I think the new judge we have for Justice Kennedy was Justice Brett Kavanaugh. I think he is probably a little more conservative, but that was kind of a wash. But when Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, and let me tell you something, the left worship Ruth Bader Ginsburg. They call her the Queen, the notorious RBG. They worship this woman. She is one of the most liberal justices. She probably is the most liberal Supreme Court justice of all time. She took an activist stance where the law doesn't apply, where the Constitution doesn't directly say something. She said, we're going to put it into law. That's a layman terms, okay? So she took an activist, and instead of a constitutional stance, and there were then the conservative justices, I about said Republican, forgive me. I know they're not political parties, but also the Supreme Court, you can't separate the fact that justices have to have a political opinion and bent, okay? But I know that they're not party oriented officially. But the conservative justices have a rule of thumb. Most of them consider themselves originalists, saying, what did the original intent of the Constitution say? And how do we interpret the laws through that and apply that? Also, the Senate has a rule called the filibuster, and I'm gonna read you from, this is actually from the United States Senate.gov, what that consists of. The Senate tradition of the unlimited debate has allowed for use of the filibuster, a loosely defined term of action designed to prolong debate and delay or prevent a vote on a bill, resolution of amendment, or other debatable questions. Prior to 1917, the Senate rules did not provide for a way to end debate and force a vote on a measure. That year, the Senate adopted a rule to allow a two-thirds majority to end a filibuster, a procedure known as cloture. In 1975, the Senate reduced the number of votes required for closure from two-thirds of senators voting to three-fifths of all senators duly chosen and sworn, or 60 of the 100 senators. So a lot of bills get stopped because of the filibuster rule, because a lot of times they want 60 instead of 51 out of the 100 senators, and that's what stops a lot of progress. Now, a lot of people like this rule because it does stop progress and it slows the Senate down. It makes them, it's supposedly to make them have more compromises. But there is nothing in the Constitution that requires the filibuster. You could abolish the filibuster and it still be under the Constitution. And there is times when the filibuster is what they call a nuclear option. So the Republicans use the nuclear option to appoint their Supreme Court justices. The Harry Reid and the Democrats did it first to appoint other federal justices. So there has been points when they use the nuclear option and go down from 60 to 51. And if you can't get Um, 51, if it's 50-50, then the vice president comes in and votes. And if the vice president's of the same party of the majority in the Senate, he's obviously going to vote for the bill or what way that they want the bill to pass. There are 27 amendments in the Constitution. I encourage you all to read them. The first 10 are known as the Bill of Rights, which was added on after the rest of the Constitution, as the founding fathers saw it as a need and a necessity. At least many of them did, because even with the good structure of the government, they proceeded to make, if there was not any protection against the government from the, if there wasn't any protection for the individuals, the government, then the government still had the ability to run roughshod within a majority vote. You also have the ability to amend the Constitution. You could change it whatever you want to make it say whatever you want to. And I'm reading from whitehouse.gov. An amendment may proceed by 2/3 vote of both the House of Congress, or if 2/3 of the states request one by a convention called for that purpose. The amendment must then be ratified by 3/4 of the state legislature, or 3/4 of conventions called for in each state for ratification. In modern times, amendments have traditionally specified a framework in which this must be accomplished, usually a period of several years. So that's how you amend the Constitution. You either have 2/3 vote from the House, from both sides of Congress, and then it has to be passed by, or you have to have 2/3 of the state. The amendment must go back to the states and be ratified by 3/4 of the states. So that's very hard to do, especially in modern times when you can't get 3/4 to agree with anything in America. But there is an ability to amend the Constitution to have new rights or to take old rights away, or to change the government, like we changed the government with the 17th Amendment, making it to where state senators are elected by the people and not appointed by the state government. And I just want to clarify, I know I said earlier that the president had the power to invade a foreign country. That's a little bit debated. But he does have the power to use the military. Some people would say Congress has to make a decision before he can go in. But in recent times, presidents have been gave the power to do with the military as they need to protect the American people, and then Congress would vote later. Now I want to get to, now that we see how the government works in the United States, and there's a lot of other things involved about how campaigns work and how finance works, and how the campaigns are financed, and but we don't have time for all of that today. I just explained the three branches of government, and I want you to realize that each 50 states, all of the 50 states have their own constitution, setting up their own government. There are many republics inside of the big republic. So the states are small republics. And then the U.S. government is the big republic. And almost all the states look very similar to the U.S. government with a little changes here and there. The only exception to that is one state which only has a Senate and doesn't have a House of Representatives. And I want to give you all a moment. What state do you think that is? I'll give you a couple seconds. That is the state of Nebraska. Nebraska used to have a House of Representatives, but it passed in a referendum to abolish the lower house. That's what the House of Representatives is called. It's referred to as the lower house. So they only have state senators. They have the least amount of legislatures in the United States from their state government. I think they have like 24 senators, which is crazy to think state only having 24 legislatures. In Virginia, we have 140 legislatures, 40 in the Senate, 100 in the House. Now I'm going to talk briefly about what a Christian should do regarding the government. The Bible has laid out in the Romans 13 about being a good citizen. Now, this is my idea from a Christian perspective. We should volunteer, we should vote, but we shouldn't get so caught up with the political world that we forget about the kingdom of God, we forget about spiritual things. There have been bad people in our government before, and we survived. The church survived. We have to remember to win souls first, love God first, then participate in the government. But we shouldn't just say that's too worldly, we're going to ignore the government. That's when things become more corrupt. So we have to have our voice heard. Now, people will scream separation in church and state all the time, and I kind of agree with that term. All that means is an official church, like the Roman Catholic Church, should not be over the government or should have a huge say within the government. But individuals are allowed to vote their conscience, and legislatures are allowed to run on Christian principles and say we're going to imply those Christian principles in the government. That is not a theocracy if the people are voting for them and the people are voting their conscience with their faith, because the left does it all the time. Leftism is just a different religion. Okay, they are going to force their values on you. They're going to force their opinions on you and their worldview on you. That's what politics is. It's about force. But we get our force from the consent of the governed, set up with checks and balances and majority rules with minority rights. So Christians have to get involved in government, because at least in some sense, to be good citizens. Now, when I say have to get involved in government, that could just mean casting your vote and being an informed voter. That doesn't mean you have to go to party events. It doesn't mean you have to work on a campaign or volunteer. But I think that some should, maybe not all of them, but some that feel led to should definitely get involved in the community like that. But you should at least vote. At the very least, vote. I want to play you a message from Romans 13 in the NIV Bible.
Romans chapter 13. Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers hold no terror for those who do right, but for those who do wrong. Do you want to be free from fear of the one in authority? Then do what is right, and you will be commended. For the one in authority is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for rulers do not bear the sword for no reason. They are God's servants, agents of wrath, to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. Therefore, it is necessary to submit to the authorities, not only because of possible punishment, but also as a matter of conscience. This is also why you pay taxes, for the authorities are God's servants, who give their full time to governing. Give to everyone what you owe them. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor.
And I think that's a good little scripture. That's going to be our Bible verses of the day. And Paul is writing this when the Christians are being killed and persecuted The Roman Empire is hitting them very hard. So listen, this doesn't mean you have to like your government. This doesn't mean you have to love everything they're doing. You can admit that some of it is wrong, and you should get in the process to making your government better, okay? And making it better for Christians and making it better for everyone, okay? And in this process, listen, we have the right to protest. It's in the First Amendment. Peacefully protest, not violently protest, but we have the right to peacefully protest. So if I go up to the White House and with a sign that says abortion kills babies, that's not me dishonoring the government. That's not me being in rebellion. That's me using my civil duty as a Christian to try to speak the truth, okay? But I don't think rebellion. I think rebellion 99.9% of the time is wrong and sinful against the government. I would hold out that 1% case when it's completely awful, and I wouldn't even take my word on that, okay? Because it seems like the Bible suggests a little differently, but you could make the case that if the government is treating people so harshly, you have an obligation to resist that. And actually, there is such a thing as Christian civil disobedience, which is more effective than taking up arms of rebellion. If the government asks you to do something sinful, like no longer pray or to no longer worship God, that then you have a job to civilly disobey. Say, listen, whatever you want, whatever government wants me to do, whatever they have passed through the legislation, through the conscience of the people, I'll do that as long as you're not asking me to sin against God. And one time you ask me to sin against God, that's when it supersedes, God's law supersedes man's law. If you ask me to hurt someone or kill somebody that is innocent, I'm not going to do that. That's against God's law, okay? But we are to listen to the laws. If it says drive 55 miles an hour and you're going over a little bit, slow down. Now, everyone breaks some laws like the speed limit and this and that, but we generally try not to. Okay, that's the point. Generally try not to, and be good citizens. And good citizens try to inform their government. They pray for their governing officials, no matter what party's in office, okay? Even if it's the people you don't like. And realizing that God instituted those people there for His will. Now, they may be wicked, they may be in rebellion against God, but that doesn't matter. God can use wicked and evil people to get His will across and to get His purpose across. God can use evil that was things that were intended for evil and pure evil and turn them into good. That's how good God is. God can use evil and turn it into good. So please get involved in government, even if that's just being an informed voter and voting, okay? And I would encourage everyone to vote in the primaries too, even if you're not going to get involved in campaigns, even if you're not going to do be in party politics. Please pay attention and vote in primaries, because the people that win primaries run in the general election, and that's super important. And try to pay attention to all level of politics, county, state, and federal, because they're all very important. And try your best to implement your Christian values. I want to say God bless you all. Thank you for listening. I hope this can help somebody, because there are some people that get confused when it comes to government. And listen, I don't know it all. There's several things I couldn't talk about, and I would love to talk more about the history of the Constitution, but we didn't get to that. Maybe we'll talk more about the history of the Constitution and the founding of the United States while we have certain amendments. Maybe we'll do that. But I want to start focusing a lot on the Bible studies that we're going to do, and I want to do some scriptures. I want to do some character development, characters in the Bible, and break them down in biblical topics. But we're not going to forget politics here, because that's how we kind of started, and it's very important, and it's important for Christians. Thank you guys so much. If you want to give, you can go to Patreon, and the link is in the bio. And thank you all, guys, for coming. I hope you have a great day, and Jesus is King.